Hey, is anybody home? Who's there? Well, hello, one person. Come on and step in the chat and say hello. At least say, Madam Whip-Ass, how the hell are you? If I don't know you, I've never interacted with you on social media before. Please, by all means, come in the chat and introduce yourself. I really would like to get to know you and know who you are or who you be. Is that all right? But if you choose to sit there like a bump on a log and remain anonymous or just disappear, that's all right too. Either way, welcome, 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 and welcome. All right, so we are winding up. These will be the final chapters of this very good book by Bunny Debarge. Debarge is. By the way, if you do not know, she's in the process of writing volume 3, the third and final book. When that comes out, I can tell you now, I most likely won't read it right away. I'll wait about a year or two, you know, just so she can make some money off of it. I don't think people really mind, you know, once their books have hit their peak and you read it online. Now, if a book comes out and you reading it online, I don't know, I got a problem with that. So that's why I'm not going to do it. It will be a good while before I get to that third book to read it online. A good while. I think it's only right, you know? And so I'm it's kind of bittersweet that this book is ending, for me anyway. I'm really not ready for it to end. Like, there's some stuff I want to know. Mainly, if Bobby ever told her about the men he was pulling, that nobody would ever believe or even think that they can be pulled by another man. I would love to know if he eventually spilled the beans, or was she in a state of mind like, she'd rather not know or hear about it. I hope that wasn't the case. Maybe she needs to come out with a fourth book, a gossip book, and just tell everything she know. Make them blind items, but obvious to the reader. But you're not saying anybody's names. Just a whole book full of gossip. I'd buy it and read it. Mm-hmm. All right. Ada, hey, how are you? Okay, good for you, Ada. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm glad you're getting into the serial killer stuff. It's interesting as heck, ain't it? I tell you, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Child. And people be like, that's weird, Madam Whip-Ass. Why are you interested in serial killers? Well, detectives are interested in serial killers. Psychologists, like psychotherapists, um, whole wealth professors who teach courses on killers and criminal law and all that stuff. Are they weird too? Nah, I just am fascinated by monsters, if you will. It's fascinating to me how there are individuals in human form who go to work, who are married, who have children, who go camping, and they are literally monsters. And what fascinates me more is that society is always wanting to teach children there's no such thing as monsters, and that's such a lie. I'm fascinated by how somebody can be a BTK and nobody knows. Heck, he was like a compliance officer, wore a uniform and everything, worked in this building, and down the hall was a detective unit. He worked down the hall for more than a decade from detectives, and nobody knew the wiser that he was BTK. How do you sleep with this man every night and have his children? You don't know he's BTK. And then it's the inner workings of the mind. And I'll just speak about BTK because he is the serial killer of the day, along with Rex Heuermann. And could you imagine, just imagine, 90% of your day you are fantasizing. People fantasize. You probably have fantasized. And if you have fantasized before, imagine fantasizing the way you fantasize 90% of your day, every day. Except your fantasies include binding, torturing, and killing. And this is what you fantasize 90% of your waking life. And nobody knows. And if you're real smart, you will study sociopaths and psychopaths because they're all around us, especially out here in these YouTube streets. You need to be able to spot them and recognize them. You might find yourself in a relationship with one. And it's very easy to become entangled in a relationship with a psychopath or a sociopath because they're quite charming. That's one of their attributes. But you need to be able to spot the little idiosyncrasies and the red flags. Because understand, sociopaths slash psychopaths, they are the tornadoes of the human race. I'll say it again. Sociopath slash psychopath are the tornadoes of the human race. Think about a tornado. Think about a neighborhood or a whole town. You drive through this town, you got Home Depots, you got residential neighborhoods, there's driveways, there's lawns, there's beautiful trees, there's cars in the driveway, nice homes, you got commercial areas and all types of buildings, office buildings, mom and pop stores, gas stations, Think of a whole town. Now think, how many times have you seen on the news a tornado came through the town, comes through a neighborhood, right? When the tornado is going, you can't even make it out that it was a neighborhood. All you see was what was once trees. They're like twigs sticking up out the ground. And then there's just piles of wood and debris that once were standing houses. The lawns are gone. The cars are toppled over and blown blocks away. I've even seen cars stuck up in a tree. And that's how sociopaths, psychopaths leave your life in complete devastation, emotionally, financially, physically at times, if they don't kill you, mentally, complete devastation. Narcissistic personality disorder. These things I'm speaking to you about briefly, I wish you would go ahead on your own journey and do your own research. Google is your friend. Start with narcissistic personality disorder. You might find out that you dated an individual like that before. You might realize, you know what? That sounds like my brother in law. You know what? That sounds like my friend's cousin. Research it, study it, internalize it. Know about these different personalities. And then if you have children, you know, young adults, especially teenagers, teach them about it. Have them go on their own research journey. A classic narcissist, Donald Trump. I'm just giving you an example, a familiar example. Narcissistic personality disorder. And understand that we all have some sense of narcissism within us, a healthy sense of narcissism. It's the malignant narcissism that we have to be careful of. If you pay attention in these YouTube streets, you'll see a couple, quite a few content creators, malignant narcissistic personality disorder. Malignant. Anyway, enough of that. Y'all probably like, man, we're bad. Skip to the book. I'm getting to the book. Okay, but it was a black serial killer in LA, and his wife claimed she didn't, and neither did his drinking partner. So it's very possible. Many men have whole other families, and the wives never know. I've never read Helter Skelter, but isn't that something? Do you know one of those women just got released? Leslie Van Houten. I am 56 years old. She just been out of prison for about 2 months now, perhaps. I am 56 years old. She was released when I was 55, but she had been in prison since I was 2 years old. She's the only one out of that whole clan that got released. Everybody else, if they still alive, they still in prison. And quite a few of them died already, including Charlie Manson. But I think that's cruel. She's like 77 now. And think about it. She's been in there since she was a teenager, like 1920 or something. In prison. And now she's like 77. I think that's cruel to release somebody out in society. Why would you want to come out? Come out to what? You don't even know the world. This is a totally different world than it was when she went in 1969. There were no cell phones. There's nothing. Why would you want to come? If I was her, I would have just stayed in there and just died in prison. You'd have to take me out of prison in a body bag at that point. She's 77. Who's gonna hire her old ass at 77? What kind of resume does she have? Oh, well, I did laundry in the prison for the last 52 years. And rent is high as hell. When she went into prison, rent for a 3-bedroom apartment probably was something like $400 a month. Now, what is it? 300 a 3-bedroom apartment go for what? $2,100, $2,200 a month? How is she gonna make that amount of money to pay her damn rent? Not that she needs a 3-bedroom, but if a 3-bedroom is like $2,200 a month, you know what a 1-bedroom would be: $1,600, $1,800 a month. Why come out of prison at 77? Yeah, they let her out. And I don't think they should. They should have let her die in prison like everybody else. The other one, I think Susan Atkins, she had cancer. She was pleading, please let me go home and be with my family in my last days. It was like, no, die, bitch. You're leaving out of here in a body bag. I don't think any of them should have been released. Hell, they never let Charlie Manson out. Guess what? Truth be told, Charlie Manson should have never did no time in prison. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't even kill anybody. He wasn't even there at the murders. But he lived to be 83 years old. They made sure his crazy ass died in prison. He never even killed anybody. He should have never been charged and convicted. Well, he told them to do it. So just because somebody tells you to do something, If I told you to jump off a bridge and you jumped off the bridge, is that really my fault? I didn't even walk you to the bridge. I didn't even tell you where the bridge was. I just said go jump off a bridge. Y'all don't get me started. Okay, I'm getting to the book. Chapter 50, No More Denial. Tony and I were in trouble. Wait a minute, did I do 50? No, I'm up 51. Let me make sure. Yep, sorry. 51, chapter 51, Unwelcomed Homecoming. Okay, here we go. It was not long before my girls were back in Los Angeles. Mama had since returned home to Grand Rapids, and I would soon follow. My plan was to live with her for a while. I decided not to move to Steubenville, Ohio with Tony. Before Tony left Los Angeles, we hired a moving company to drive our belongings back east. Everything we owned was now stuck in Pittsburgh, and we needed money to get our belongings to Michigan. The drive and storage cost a few $1,000s, and we did not have the money to cover the expenses. I became worried. I needed to find a way to get our belongings to Michigan. It was everything I had left in this world besides my children, my gold albums, family pictures, and other valuables that were irreplaceable. I did not want to lose my life's work. However, I had no idea how I would get the money, and the cost was going up daily. To complicate matters, I also needed money to return home. This was going to be costly as well. I asked Elle if he would help me return to Grand Rapids, and he agreed to think about helping, but had not yet given me an answer. While waiting for a response, I could not bring myself to ask him for the storage money. I was now faced with losing my belongings, and the anxiety was killing me. It felt as though my life was hanging in the balance. It was time to return home. I could not stay in Los Angeles another day. There was nothing left for me in the city. I felt like a hollow, empty shell with a dark, overcast cloud following me around. I was lonely and had nothing. I did not have my brothers. I did not want my husband, and I did not want to live in Steubenville. At the time, all I wanted was my mother. I needed her, and I wanted to go home. I needed family and friends in Michigan to just love me and support me unconditionally. It felt like the place I needed to be at this time in my life. I was lost and in a very poor mental state. I felt unloved and like a failure. My intentions were never to come to California and fail. I never intended to return home downtrodden. I came to California to pursue a music career and build a musical legacy. And what happened to me? What happened to us? We came to California a close knit family, caring and loving one another to the point we always knew what was going on in one another's lives. We were always concerned for one another's well being. This started when we were children. If one of us was hurting, we all hurt. We would then rally around each other to make sure they got what was needed. In the beginning, everyone accepted the idea our closeness was the only way to survive the industry. We believed in one another and provided each other unconditional support. Somewhere along fame's twisted path, we took a wrong turn. My mind drifted to happier times. I thought about our first promotional tour and a tour with Luther Vandross. How did we come so fractured? We stopped caring about one another's place in life and where we were going with our careers. We began hoarding ideas and not sharing them with one another. We became suspicious and looked at ideas. The only thing we seemed to do successfully and effortlessly was get high. This was not in our plan, and certainly not our purpose. Thinking back to our childhood, all we had to hold on to was God since we experienced the childhood from hell. We learned about heaven and we desired to go there when it was God's timing. We learned about God and had a chance to know Him personally. If we did not have God, we would not have had any hope for the situations we were now facing. We were out in the world living a life of hell. The only thing real in our lives was God. I found the people in Los Angeles fake. Yeah, I hear that a lot. They lived in a complete fantasy world. Everybody knew somebody who knew someone famous, either through social or familial association. It was nothing to wear the finest outfits, drive the fanciest cars, yet live out of a post office box. To me, Los Angeles was where lost angels congregated. It was a totally different world than Grand Rapids, Michigan. It now felt so far away from where I wanted to be in life. Fame was no longer appealing. All I had left from my time in the spotlight were broken dreams. I needed to be home. The hope and optimism I felt when I first arrived were gone. Since then, my eyes were wide open, and I learned so much about the city I once loved. Now, nothing about the city was real to me. Maybe the never ending sunshine made sin so plentiful. The city was flooded with people desperate to fulfill their dreams. Sadly, there were just as many broken dreams. My dreams were now among the broken ones. I was miserable and wanted to feel like a child and be comforted by my mother. Yet my faith remained, and I figured God could bring my life full circle. I just didn't know how or when. My hope was still steadfast in God. Elle ended up coming through and gave me the money needed for my children and me to fly home. I would be leaving the following day. The girls and I took the bus to the airport. I felt sad leaving my brothers behind. I did not know what would happen to them. They were all in trouble, including Elle. He looked to be okay to anyone not close to him. However, my brother was miserable along with the rest of us. Neither of us were living in our purpose. I was in so much emotional turmoil and also feeling my brother's emotional pain. It was hard to carry their burden, so I know I needed to let go, but I did not know how to at the time. I would have to fall on my face a few more times before life showed me how to stop living for my brothers. As the girls and I entered the plane, tears were in my eyes. I had such beautiful thoughts when I first came to Los Angeles. I had such big dreams and high hopes. Most of all, I was confident. My brothers and I had favor when we first arrived. If not for God's favor, we would have been starving artists much longer. We were in California without money or car. At times, we did not know where we would lay our heads. A person can really get lost in California while pursuing their dreams. I saw many fold under pressure. At least we made it to the top, I thought. We landed somewhere. Although we did not sustain our success, at least the stars aligned in our favor. Many changes happened in our lives. Many things were still going on. Nevertheless, we were still being kept. We were the kept ones and did not realize how close God kept us to Him. At this very moment, I stopped and gave thanks to God. I remembered He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Therefore, in my heart, I could leave my brothers behind and know they would be all right. There was no reason for me to worry about them. God was keeping us all covered. I stepped onto the plane and said my farewell to Los Angeles. We arrived home to Grand Rapids. I did my best to hide the pain from my children. I sensed they knew I was sad. They had been there with me and seen it go all the way up, then all the way down. Scared to death and not knowing what would happen next, I gathered up my girls, hopped into a cab, and headed to my mother's house. There was no one to greet us at the airport. There was no warm reception at home. No one was there cheering for or making a fuss over the fallen star, Bunny Debarge. Chapter 52, Chaos and Confusion. Mama's house was in an uproar when I walked inside. Tommy and Ducky's children were there, but the parents were nowhere in sight. Mama was nearly in tears as she told me Ducky had left Tommy and the children. She did not think Ducky was planning on coming back. She should have been back, she stated through tears. I have not heard anything. I begged her not to leave these kids on me. I looked around. Well, why wouldn't she? You the one with the money. So you just want to control the money, but you don't want to take care of the kids? Get out of here. Hey, I looked around, and the children were all over the place playing without a care in the world. Mama was carrying around the baby, little Chico, on her hip. The house was small, only big enough for Mama, her husband, Poppy, my sister Carol, and her twin Daryl. I wondered where my children and I would sleep. This is unfair, was my first thought. I needed Mama right now for what I was going through. Ducky and Tommy have always had Mama. I needed to be here now, and Ducky should have taken her children with her if she wanted to leave. Besides, Ducky has her own mother. This is my mother. I was in bad shape and needed help. I needed somewhere to live with my children. It was my turn, I thought. Enough is enough with Ducky and Tommy. I was furious. I could not wait to hear from them and give them a piece of my mind. Mama was worried sick about Ducky. She said it was unusual for her not to call. When Ducky left, she told me the kids were just as much Tommy's kids as they were hers, and it was time for Tommy to keep them. She said Tommy had money now, so he could do it. She said once she found a job, she would send for them. I would reach out to Ducky the next time she called. I knew how she felt about her children, and it was unlike her to leave them behind. Truthfully, Ducky was not herself anymore, and she was tired. But why now? Why when I needed to be home with my mother? I had no idea what to expect once I returned home. However, I did not expect a return to a madhouse. I did not feel at home in my own mother's house. I was not welcome because Ducky and Tommy had put an enormous strain on the household. I had been home a couple of weeks before Ducky finally called. Mama was not there, so I was able to talk freely to Ducky. She was glad to hear my voice and wanted to know what was going on with me. I explained to her I had returned home for good and needed my mother's help. I asked what was going on with her and if she was going to come back to get her children. She told me she had to get a job and it was over between her and Tommy. She went on to explain how she was unable to care for the children and her mother could not help because she worked full time. The kids are better off with Tommy, she stated. I jumped right in on her. The kids are not with Tommy, I said. He is not here, Ducky. The children have been put off on Mama, and you know this, Ducky. Tommy's nowhere around. He is in the streets. Ducky's response surprised me. She did not seem to be the least bit concerned about my comment. I cannot help that, Bunny. They are his kids, too. I'm not leaving them on your mother. Tommy is. I do not have any money to take care of them. Tommy does. Your mother has his money, so she does not have to worry about the money to take care of them. I have no rights to anything. She has it all. Take care of them. Everything Ducky said was valid. There was nothing I could say to counter her argument. My whole attitude toward her swiftly changed, and suddenly I understood perfectly. I told her I wanted her to be okay because she was going through a struggle. I shared my pain and how desperate I was to get myself together. I felt lost and needed to live with Mama. I begged her to come home as soon as she could and get her children. I understood her not wanting to take Tommy back, though. Ducky did understand my point of view. In fact, we both understood each other's pain firsthand. She had lived with our family for years. Ducky was both easy to communicate with and easygoing. She agreed to come get the children when she could afford them. Otherwise, she did not see herself coming back for good. She had found a new love life and was being wined and dined. Ducky had found love, support, and affection in the arms of a woman. She was being taken care of now, and she missed having security in her life. I could not be upset with her no matter how hard I tried. I knew her life struggles. Before hanging up the phone, I reassured her of my love and asked her to please be careful. I heard happiness in her voice, which made me happy. However, after ending the call, I looked at her children and mine. They were all suffering. Ducky had a decision to make. I knew it was hard for her to walk away from her children. She loved her children, and I believed she would eventually get to a place where she could be their mother again. Ducky was caught up in meeting her own needs at the moment. She had to figure out life, which was understandable. Her approach might not have been the best. However, she would have to figure out the consequences of her actions. She had lived within the confines of our family for so long. It was now time for her to spread her wings. Ducky really had nothing to lose, which was not lost already. In Grand Rapids, she had no life and no money. Why would she sit back and allow someone else to dish her husband's money out to her? She was finally going for her own. I gave her my blessings. Mama was sorry she had missed Ducky's call and wanted to know our entire conversation in full detail. I found it hard to tell her anything. When is she coming back? Did she say, Bunny? Mama already knew Ducky was not coming back. I guess she hoped for me to have said something to change Ducky's mind. She's not coming back, Mama. I looked over at my mother. She looked to be in distress. I began to wonder if Mama really understood why Ducky had left. If she did, she was not voicing it. Mama was devastated. She had raised her children. All her babies were adults. The twins had graduated high school. Now she was saddled with the responsibility of caring for Ducky and Tommy's small children. She did not mind being a grandmother. She just did not want to raise her grandchildren. And even though the children were with Mama most of their lives, Ducky was there to take off some of the pressure. Mama had gotten used to supporting Ducky. She did not mind helping her out. However, 4 small children at her age was a bit too much. Little Chico, who was only 6 months old, was a mama's boy and cried out all the time for his mother. Marina was 2 years old. Christian and little Tommy were not much older. Mama had tears in her eyes as she asked why Ducky would do this to her at her age. I genuinely felt sorry for my mother and Ducky too. It was a no-win situation. I forgot all about myself needing my mother. I could not put any more on Mama. Even though I was in trouble myself, I would help as best as I could when I was around. However, I had to leave Mama's house. It was too small. I was in dire straits. I had to reconsider going back. Dreaded my decision. It was not what I wanted, but there was no other choice. Chapter 53, Trying to Rebuild. I was disappointed not being able to stay with my mother. I had no other choice except to swallow my pride and call my husband, Tony. I told him to come get us and take us to Steubenville. Tony was glad to hear from me. He used his mother's car to pick us up. My in laws owned rental property in Steubenville. They let us live in the upstairs apartment over the daycare. They gave us some furniture, which we fixed up, and I enrolled the girls in school. Tony began seeking a job, and since we did not have to pay rent, we would use the money to get our belongings out of storage in Pennsylvania. I did not care to be in Steubenville, but it was better than the alternative. At least we had our own place. The world seemed to fall apart around me, and my spiritual life seemed dead. I had not been fed spiritually since I had no church to call home. And there was a church in the city I was interested in attending. The pastor was someone I knew very well. He was from my home church back in Michigan. And I was so glad to see him as pastor of a church in Steubenville. His name was Elder Richard Young. He was a good friend of our family and had ministered to me as a child. I felt it was a great blessing to be in Steubenville along with Elder Young. However, my father in law was also a pastor and with a church in the same city. He would have been insulted if I attended another pastor's church. I did not want to cause a commotion, especially since my in laws were helping us get back on our feet. Therefore, I felt an obligation to become a part of their church. I was upset about my dilemmas, though. I did not mind going to my in law's church whenever we came for a visit. However, their church would have never been on my radar if it were not for familial ties. Therefore, I rebelled and chose not to attend church at all. I've always been a very friendly person. As a result, I had no problems making new friends. Tony and I befriended a couple who lived nearby. We had a lot in common with the couple. Tony happened to have known them since his school days. We visited we visited them often just to get away from our own lives. We also did drugs with them from time to time. They did it recreationally, and it was always on the weekend. Both seemed very dedicated to their jobs, which helped to control their drug usage. Yeah, they were addicts too. I don't care if they only got high on the weekends. You only get high on the weekends, you are an addict. A functional addict, but you're still an addict. Tony and I were now freebasing. Jesus Christ, Bunny. Uh, freebasing? Ooh, you must have looked like shit on a stick in 2 weeks. We had learned how to cook cocaine. Well, good for you and your accomplishment. You learned how to cook cocaine. You really were going someplace now, weren't you? We were not doing the pills as much because we had a hard time finding them. However, Bobby found a place in Detroit where we could cop them. Whenever we had the money, Tony and I would take a ride to buy a supply. Getting drugs now was unlike when we lived in Los Angeles, where we can get our hands on pills practically every day. Detroit was a 4 hour drive and just too far away. Our love life was still not the greatest. I only came back to Tony because I felt I had no choice. I still could not bring myself to sleep with him. He would sleep in the bedroom and I would sleep on the couch. There was a young man Tony had grown up with who was also into music. Something started musically. He wanted to form a group and do some gigs around the Ohio area. He would come by often and talk about his ambitions. I was not motivated and felt he was just playing around. However, he had gone around and used my name to promote his endeavors. Apparently, he did end up finding someone to promote some gigs in the area. He came over to let Tony and I know he had found us a promoter. I was not doing anything except passing time. I decided why not. It was not as if I had anything else to do at the time. Well, you can always free base cocaine, Bunny. Pissing me off, girl. My namesake was more of a big deal to everyone else than it was to me. People were really excited about the prospect of seeing me perform. Musicians from everywhere showed up to audition and became a part of my band. Watching everything come together, I began searching for background singers. I guess my name was getting people enthused. But I was not thrilled. It seemed as though the spark I once felt when it came to performing and sharing my musical gifts had been extinguished. They were extinguished by the freebasing of cocaine. That's not in the book, that's me. I decided to just go through the motions and get through the gigs. We rehearsed every day, then would get high every night. And finally, Tony and I found a way to maintain our drug habit in Stewartville. Mm, mm, mm. We're towards the end of the book, and Bunny Debarge has finally started to royally piss me off how Tommy pissed me off in his book. I never thought I would get there with Bunny, but she's working on it. You're working on it, Bunny. You're working on it. Freebasing. I worked the band pretty hard so they could learn all of the Barge's songs. The band ended up sounding very polished, and I was proud of their quick progress. It did not take long to secure management. Excited about the prospects of managing an established group, they began to look for more lucrative gigs. They also wanted to work with the rest of the group since neither of us had a contract or management at the time. I eventually talked to the boys and asked them if they would be interested in doing some shows. If they were willing, management would send for them. The boys were excited. At the time, they were not engaged in any musical endeavors and saw it as a chance to make some fast money. Management sent for Randy, Mark, and James. We all ended up staying together at our manager's ranch in Cambridge, Ohio. We started rehearsing daily with the musicians who were allowed to stay in the guest house. I was no longer with my husband, Tony. We had gotten into a terrible argument. I decided enough is enough with our marriage. The morning after the huge blow up, I just woke up and left him. I then drove the children to Grand Rapids. It was summertime and my children were not in school, so everything worked out perfectly. I could no longer tolerate the state of our marriage. Tony and I had lost our physical and emotional bond a long time ago. It was time to end the charade. I was unhappy being married to him and grew tired of putting on a mask. It was not fair to either of us. Everything was going as planned once the boys arrived. We told management about our brother Bobby. We wanted him involved in the group's revival as well. Management was all in and asked us to get him on the phone. I called Bobby right away and they talked to him about their plans for the group. Bobby agreed to come, but put terms on his involvement. He had laid out a list of demands. Management obliged, and Bobby was on his way to Cambridge, Ohio, to join the rest of his siblings. And when Bobby arrived in town, he began to dominate and run the entire show. The managers quickly grew very fond of Bobby, and he was getting anything he wanted. They trusted Bobby's ability to get the work done. Bobby wanted to add a couple of band members to the group. He had met some boys in Rat Town. He worked with them from time to time. He was have them on the team. Robert, one of the managers, ended up flying them to Cambridge to join the band. Their names were Dan Richardson and Chucky Myers. Dan played the keyboards and Chucky played the bass. We ended up with two keyboard players and two bass players. Bobby talked management into keeping both. We rehearsed every day, and the band was sounding more and more polished. Management was on their job securing gigs. They found some promotional things for us in the city so we could test the waters. Bobby made sure we were all paid. Bobby also insisted we be allowed to return home after the performances. He wanted to make sure we had breaks in between the gigs so we would not tire out. He made sure management followed through with giving us time off. We had a show scheduled in Los Angeles, which was planned before we moved to the ranch in Cambridge, Ohio. It would pay extremely well, and we wanted to do it. After the show in Ohio, we got paid and off we went to Los Angeles. The musicians in Ohio took a break and went back to their respective homes. We had other musicians awaiting our arrival in Los Angeles. And once we arrived, James Walker was at the hotel to do our hair and makeup. I was so glad to see him again. He caught me up on all the juicy gossip going on in the city. But you don't put none of the juicy gossip in the book, Bunny. Elle came to the Los Angeles show. It was so special because all of us were together except Tommy. After the show, we went to get pills and cocaine. Who in the hell is James Gordon? We had a party in our hotel rooms. We were to check out the next day and head back to Ohio. Chico came later and joined us. His single was hot and climbing the charts. We were so proud of him. We did not get any sleep while in Los Angeles. We were too busy getting high. Before leaving, we made a call to our managers. We asked if we could bring James Walker back to Cambridge. He convinced them we needed him to do our hair. They agreed and paid for his ticket to Ohio. We were having a ball. We returned to Ohio high and had enough pills for the days ahead. None of us were taking our time in Cambridge seriously. It was just something to pass the time. I think after the disappointment with Motown and the group breaking up, we no longer had the we no longer had the hunger needed to make it. We were on the wild doing whatever we had to do to maintain our high. I was now one of the boys. I was hanging with my brothers and not facing any consequences in life. Reverend Jesse Jackson had come into town campaigning for President of the United States. Management made plans for us to perform a song before his speech. We were to sing it a cappella. We came together and quickly wrote a song. Later on at the rally, we sang the song. The news was there and caught footage of us singing. We were all set to go on our next gig. This time we would stay at an expensive hotel until it was time to hit the road. It was a plush hotel and we were able to order room service. There were no limits placed on what we would order. Everything seemed to be going smoothly up until a certain point. Something was going on behind the scenes and we were clueless. Management took us to buy new clothing for some promotional tours at the local schools. They even placed us on a daily per diem. We had no reason to believe anything was amiss. As far as we knew, management was doing their job by taking care of our needs as performers. Early one morning, while still at the plush hotel, the hotel manager paid us a visit. He told us we could not use the phone anymore nor order room service. We were taken aback and had to use the front desk phone to call our manager. They would fix the misunderstanding as soon as possible. After the call, the hotel manager told us we had to leave and could not take any of our belongings. We were now fuming. Nothing the hotel manager was saying to us made any sense. This all seemed like a bad dream. Really. Y'all too busy getting high instead of paying attention. Probably was red flags all over the place. But you're freebasing cocaine. How would you see the red flags? Y'all probably was freebasing a whole lot. You should have hallucinated red flags, but you didn't even do that. We were forced to leave the hotel with nowhere to go. The hotel manager put us out on the streets. We tried in vain to contact our managers, but to no avail. Here we were. Sal, I can't talk to you right now. I'm in the middle of reading a book about Bunny Debarge freebasing and things and getting put out in the middle of the street with nowhere to go with all her rotten siblings at the time because they're all high on drugs. Don't call me now. All right, where were we? Here we were in the streets with nowhere to stay and very little money. I had grown close to one of the guys in the band. Luckily, he had enough money to purchase a motel room. We had been talking on the low and had taken a liking to each other. We decided to hang close to each other throughout the day and night. The boys managed to call home and get money for a hotel room. We had no means of getting money for the next night and just decided to take it one day at a time. We were still trying to get in touch with our managers. I wonder what that was about. We're going to find out in a second. For some reason, my phone should not be ringing like that. It should be on silent. Sorry about that disruption. Okay, here we go. We were still trying to get in touch with our managers. We wanted to retrieve our belongings and head home. Some of the band members were from Ohio. They had cars and were able to just drive home. However, one of the band members was from Michigan. Like us, he was stuck with no money and no way to get home. Everyone's belongings were still at the hotel waiting for the tab to be paid. The tab was in the thousands of dollars. We had no idea how to pay for it. The managers were nowhere to be found. They began ignoring our phone calls because they probably knew yo was up there freebasing. Yo probably was acting like a bunch of idiots, but y'all so high that y'all didn't realize how high y'all were and acting like idiots and oblivious to the fact that the managers knew that y'all were junky freebasers. So they left you high and dry. It became apparent our managers had no money and were having financial problems. Well, hell, maybe they were freebasing too. All of y'all were freebasers. And now, were you freebasing with the managers? It's possible. Because that freebasing boy will take a $2,000 in one night if you got $2,000 in your pocket. In our last conversation with them, they were advised they would get a loan and take care of the matter. We knew nothing beyond this and were left on our own to figure out this fiasco. We all needed tickets to get home. No longer able to count on management, we had to look to other sources. The guy I was with paid my way home. Ed Wright and Joe Tannis, who had been managing the boys before this trip, got enough money together to get them back to Los Angeles. Sadly, we could not take any of our belongings. When we returned belongings back. He was in Los Angeles trying in vain to get in touch with management who were in Ohio. Bobby kept in touch with the hotel manager. The hotel manager agreed this fiasco was something beyond our control and was willing to help return our belongings for an even exchange. Since we were a known group and had a sibling with a record hit at the time, or with a hit record at the time, they wanted us to do a show at Cedar Point and include both Elle and Chico. This would pay for the tab, and our belongings would be returned. We were between a rock and a hard place and had no other choice except to agree. First, we needed to figure out how to get Elle and Chico to say yes to the hotel's terms. Bobby talked to Chico and Elle and informed them what was going on. They both agreed to do the gig. Bobby secured dates from hotel management so Elle and Chico could work it into their schedule. The hotel sold tickets to the upcoming show. All we had to do was show up and perform. 6 weeks would pass before it was time for the show. As time for the show drew near, Bobby called to remind me about the show. I did not know if I wanted to go. I had been feeling a bit under the weather and could not shake it. I told him I would let him know if I was coming. And when time came for the show, I was still not feeling my best. Plus, I did not want to go back and face another potential fiasco. I told my brother to get my belongings for me and ship them to Grand Rapids. I ain't doing that shit. I was beginning to feel sick every morning and hoping it was the result of withdrawals. Dun, 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 dun. I had formed a habit again and did not have access to any pills, so either I was sick from withdrawal or I was pregnant. Did my one night escapade lead me to getting impregnated? I realized I had not had a menstrual cycle. It dawned on me I might very well be pregnant. However, I was hoping it was just sickness from not taking the pills anymore. I was totally ashamed of myself for the indiscretion. If I happened to be pregnant, I decided not to keep it. But why not give it to Kathy? That bitch would take it. During this period in my life, I was not proud how I was conducting myself. I was no longer with Tony and pretty much doing things I would not have ordinarily done. At least my marriage to Tony sheltered me from a lot of poor decisions I was now making. So you're leaving us to draw our own conclusions. And I'm wondering, are you eloquently stating that you was hoeing around? I mean, I'm not judging you, but, I'm just saying. The day of the performance at Cedar Point came. Debarge showed up along with Chico and Elle. The band members were there as well. Everyone collected their belongings after the show. Ed Wright announced he had an engagement for Debarge abroad. We had a chance to perform in France and make some money. There was no way I was missing this opportunity. I had heard so much about France, and it was somewhere I always wanted to go. I was still having morning sickness and realized I was indeed pregnant. However, I had no plans to tell anyone since I had already made up in my mind to have an abortion. I was ashamed of this decision, but I had no feelings for the person who impregnated me and was not about to have his child. I planned to have the abortion upon returning from France. Y'all, I'm up to chapter 54. It's only chapter 54. And then finally, chapter 55. If you don't mind, I must play some of this sucky music because if I play any other kind of music, YouTube is going to have it. So Bear with it. I'll be back shortly. Time to break. phone loop on my crown? Oh, it did. All right, I'm back. We coming around the mountain now. We up to chapter 54. 54. Hey, Felicia. Bye, Felicia. But yeah, we are at chapter 54, and the title is France. Before heading to France, we had gigs scheduled in Los Angeles. I noticed that Bobby's voice was sounding different. Lately, he had been hoarse to the point he would have to pass the microphone for me to sing his high notes. This was unlike Bobby, and I could tell he was getting worried. I told him he needed to see a doctor. He brushed me off and said he would when he returned from France. I believed Bobby because this appeared to be more than just a common sore throat. He had never suffered with hoarseness. Now his voice was going in and out, and he had no explanation as to why. Thankfully, Debarge already had passports from the time we went overseas with Motown. However, Ed Wright had to get passports for Bobby and James Walker. We decided to take James Walker with us to France. Not only was he a part of our family, we also wanted him to do our hair and makeup. It took Ed no time at all to get Bobby and James's passports, and we were soon on our way to France. The flight would be long, therefore we all took fours and doors to help ease the fatigue associated with the long flight. We all took fours and doors. Okay. We were now in the air, and the pilot had turned off the seatbelt light. We were all seated in first class except James Walker. He had a coach ticket and was seated at the rear of the plane. James Walker thought this was unfair. After the seatbelt light was off, James walked to the first class where we were all seated. It's not fair. You all get to sit in first class, and I have to sit in coach like a sardine. Before anyone could say anything to ease his frustrations, Bobby went in. Excuse me, James, you are not a Debarge. You are just a hairdresser. Do not start that sissy shit. And you are sardine and fish. Well, damn, Bobby. Tell him how you really feel. James Walker just stood there with his mouth agape, stunned by Bobby's abrasive language. I could see that James's feelings were hurt, and Bobby felt no remorse. James was part of our family, and we loved him very much. However, sometimes Bobby would become jealous of our relationship with him. He was always reminding James Walker he was not related to the DeBarges. He would point out to James how we were sisters and brothers, and this did not include him. Tired of Bobby going in on our friend, I jumped to James's defense. This upset Bobby, and he became livid. Before I knew it, all hell broke loose in the friendly skies. James Walker, seeing the situation spinning out of control, returned to his seat and coach. I started out trying to keep peace and explain to Bobby what he said was not right. I told him he was cold and always hurting people's feelings. I asked him how would he like it if someone hurt his feelings. Bobby did not appreciate me defending James Walker, and he left. Then why not give up my seat and go to the back of the plane? The boys noticed the exchange between Bobby and I heating up and decided to move out the way and into another seat. They knew there was no stopping either of us now. I was seated between Mark and Randy. Once Mark moved, I was able to get closer to Bobby. You did not have to say it like that. That was cold, Bobby. Bobby was determined to let me know he meant every word he had spoken. I said what I meant. Now the sissy is gone after he done started all this mess. He ought to be glad he's here. I mean, really. And he's got the nerve to complain. You guys can spoil him. I'm not. he stated without flinching. He's not a Debarge, and I meant that. After getting his point across, he made a statement about me keeping my mouth shut. Excuse me, I said while picking up one of our promotional pictures. Do you see your face on here? It was a picture of the group Debarge, and of course, Bobby's image was nowhere to be found. In hindsight, I should not have said such mean words to my brother. I was just tired of him being mean to people and wanted him to understand how it felt to be humiliated. This made Bobby even angrier. Before I knew it, he referred to me as a bitch. That was it. I was no longer going to stand for Bobby's coarse words towards me. We engaged in a back and forth verbal tirade, whereas we hurled insult after insult at each other. Our argument grew so loud the pilot announced we were about to have an emergency landing. Both Bobby and I thought we had caused the emergency landing because of our argument. We quickly shut our mouths and put on our seatbelts. Bobby vowed never to talk to me again, and I told him I could not care less. I guess we were no longer sister and brother, according to Bobby. At the moment, I did not care. We gave each other the silent treatment the remainder of the flight and resorted to throwing eye daggers here and there. Once we were allowed to remove our seatbelt, I quickly moved away from Bobby. France ended up being beautiful and the food simply amazing. However, I was too sick to fully enjoy it. I was too sick to do much of anything and wanted to return home. I had matters that needed to be taken care of and soon. James Walker wanted to go home as well. He had had enough of the abuse from Bobby. Bobby would not let it go and amped up the argument once we landed in France. James Walker and I returned home, leaving the others in France. Chapter 55, final chapter. Well, Bunny Debarge, this was a great book. I thank you for recognizing that I was reading your book and you not having any issues with it. It's been a blessing to myself, and I'm sure many others who are listening and those to come. I appreciate your honesty, um, and I just wish you all the best. When I returned home, I followed through and had the abortion. I was not, it was not long before I was myself again. Tony was calling all the time, wanting to know my plans for our marriage. I did not want to go back to him. Again, I felt there was no other choice and did it for the children's sake. Tony worked and I needed help. The thought of reaching out to social services in Grand Rapids was not fun. I was Bunny Debarge and everyone knew me. It was an embarrassing situation. I put off going back to Tony as long as humanly possible. I was back staying at my mother's house. Mama's situation with Tommy's children did not help my situation. Ducky was not coming back anytime soon. School was about to start. I needed to find a place to live and fast. Yet I had no money and was not about to go on welfare. Tony was willing to move to Grand Rapids since I did not want to remain in Steubenville and get a job. I finally gave in and told him to come. We would stay in Mama's basement until we got our own place. I and Tony quickly landed a job. It did not take long for us to begin looking for an apartment. We found a place on the northwest side of town. It was a small apartment, but it was ours. We fixed it up to our liking. All three of my girls were now in school. Tony was in a Head Start program, and the bus picked her up each day. Demia and Janae were both in junior high school. I was miserable living in Grand Rapids and hated being back with Tony. We were both, we both were using pills and cocaine more than ever. The pills were hard to come by though, Every so often, we took a trip to Detroit to cop some pills. We were fast becoming cross addicted. I was missing California like crazy. At every opportunity, I would go for a visit. It was the month of March, and Bobby and I had birthdays coming up. James Walker also had a birthday in March. He was good friends with the singer Sherelle, who also had a birthday in March. A party for Sherelle was being planned, and I wanted to be a part of it. James Walker wanted all the March babies to celebrate birthdays together. He was sending a ticket for me to come to Los Angeles, where I would stay at Sherelle's house. I had never met her before and only knew her as the artist who sang duets with Alexander O'Neal. It was a beautiful party, and anyone was present. Sherelle knew many famous people who all showed up to celebrate her special day. Ellen Chico showed up in a limousine. I showed up with James Walker and Sherelle's sister Rhonda. We stayed for most of the party, then left and had our own party. We got high and partied the remainder of the night. The next day, I linked up with Bobby. He had been at the party, but not when I was there. He came after I had already left. We did a recap of the night. Bobby went on to mention he may have started something he might regret. I asked him what he meant. He stated Elle was high at the party last night. This startled me, and I could not believe what I was hearing. Now, my brother L, he would never do such a thing, I stated. Yeah, he was, Bunny. Bobby seemed very concerned and disappointed. Apparently, someone gave him some coke to snort, and he was wired up. He was running his mouth about it and acting all silly. I was mad about it and asked him who gave it to him. He was tripping. I had to give him some pills to calm him down. After the pills hit him, he started saying, Damn, I've been missing it. Why didn't you tell me it was like this? I have been missing all this time. He was like a little kid, Bunny, and he liked it. I shook my head in disgust. Of course he liked it, Bobby. Don't we all? This is not good news. I then began to worry about El. He's all right, Bobby stated. I was with him all night. I talked to him and told him he did not want to start getting high. I told him to look what it is doing to the rest of us. Although Bobby and I were heavy drug users, we did not want Elle to get involved with drugs. A part of me wished I had never started. I just hope he listens to you, Bobby. I stated, very concerned. Bobby then goes on to tell me Elle was lonely and was no longer happy being in the music business without his family. It was getting to him, and he was on the wild side. I knew this in my heart to be true. I remembered being on stage alone without my brothers, and it was a very lonely experience. Elle had just finished his album entitled Gemini. He was leery of Motown and wanted out of his contract. For a while, my brother was not writing his own stuff. He was not even producing, and this was so unlike him. He had been under so much pressure for Motown to leave the group during the Rhythm of the Night album, it stifled his ability to write and produce. I was so proud of his Gemini album. I felt he had some good material on it. At least he began writing again on this album. However, in my heart, I knew Elle would never be as big as he was when we were together as a group. It was not the same. The anointing was on the family. It was supposed to turn out. God knew what he was doing. I believed deep in my heart we would be together again and sing for his glory. We would be on stage again as children of God. We would sing praises to him while glorifying his name. I held this vision close to my heart. I did not know how he was going to do it, but I believed he would in due time. I felt Al knew this as well, and he was simply going through the motions. He was breaking bread with many who recognized the uniqueness of who he was, but could not visualize the true vision God had for him. Now, my brother L was getting high and enjoying it. I knew he was in trouble just like the rest of us. He had begun to cover his pain with drugs. L on down to the twins, which included James, Chico, Carol, and Darryl, were the last five children between Mama and Daddy. Unfortunately, they did not experience the hell the first five children did with Daddy and Mommy. They were too young to understand what was going on. However, they caught the repercussions of the fallout, especially James. James was caught up in Bobby's madness resulting from his childhood abuse by Daddy. With James being Daddy's favorite, Bobby targeted him relentlessly. James did not understand Bobby's wrath and found it hard to deal with it at times. The younger siblings were witnessing our pain being played out. We were living out the repercussions of childhood abuse. And unfortunately, El could no longer escape the aftermath, no matter how hard he tried. He was a part of the Five Fingers and was hurting too. After his divorce, El must have vowed to never allow a woman to overtake his emotions. He was vulnerable with Roberta, but this seemed to be a thing of the past. He never loved a woman fully and completely again. El had truly loved Roberta, and all she did was break his heart into a million tiny pieces. He became a notorious womanizer and went through women left and right. They were not hard to find. There were groupies hanging around constantly fighting for his affections. The groupies would go from an encounter with one brother to an encounter with the next. For the boys, it became a contest to see how many of them could sleep with the same girl. Once the boys' hearts were involved, they would want the girl to become their one and only. However, they would have to contend with knowing another brother or brothers had also been with the woman they now loved. That sounds like James and Randy of the Jacksons. You do know that Randy had two kids with a woman, and then Jermaine took the woman from Randy and had two kids with her. That bitch just didn't want to leave the Jackson clan. So now her children, what did they call Jermaine? Uncle Daddy. And other two called Randy Uncle Daddy. That's some bullshit. In their dysfunctional way of moving on, they would offer forgiveness without the other brother ever asking for it. With them behaving in such a manner, they were never able to regain one another's trust. Their promiscuous ways brought them so much division between their brotherly bond. There was a lot of animosity among them. They preferred to gossip behind each other's backs rather than talk it out among themselves. My brothers were hurting each other badly. They were betraying one another using women. They carried the pain of betrayal around, never dealing with it properly. Because of their closeness, they would start back hanging around each other while hiding what they truly felt about the other. Honestly, they never enjoyed hurting each other, but never learning to simply apologize for their indiscretions created a vicious cycle, whereas they did harm to each other's egos. I learned if you do not give someone the opportunity to at least apologize, the proverbial slate is never clean. You cannot begin the journey of rebuilding trust. You also do not allow the person a chance to forgive themselves and grow from they will hurt you again. Sadly, this was the story of our lives. We would forgive almost on instinct, whether the person deserved it or not. We would roll out the red carpet and allow them back into our lives with relative ease. Our hurt began to be compounded because our way of thinking was so dysfunctional. We were taught to simply forgive and forget. This line of thinking was unrealistic and definitely not rooted in truth. It was yet another scripture we had misinterpreted due to false teachings in the church. You forgive, but you do not forget until the person asks for forgiveness. You cannot allow the person back into your life until they get real and show contrition. In the meantime, you love from a distance. This gives them the opportunity to realize what they have done and forgive themselves in the process. It cleans the slate. If this does not occur, you open yourself to more hurt. It then becomes easy for people to transgress against you because they face no consequences for their actions. Nothing is settled, and trust is never regained. Because we did not know any better, we would hang around toxic people and be hurt again and again. We would allow them back into our lives with no questions asked. We would act as though nothing had occurred and treat them with the same respect as someone who had never caused us harm. As a child, I learned to shoulder the burden of people hurting me, even my loved ones. Indeed, we teach people how to treat us. My siblings and I had no idea how dysfunctional we were in our understanding of forgiveness. Our ability to give 1,000,001 chances with no questions asked stemmed from our childhood. It began when we would return to living with daddy and be forced to act as if nothing happened to force us to leave. We would try to live this happy family life. It was forced vulnerability. Mama taught us her version of forgive, forget, and move on as though nothing ever happened. Daddy never cleaned the slate with his children. He was never made to, and this seemed perfectly fine in his mind. As far as we were taught by Mama, we were doing the right thing by not holding Daddy responsible for his abusive actions. The boys were voicing their disdain for one another to me. They loved one another and would still hang around one another. Unfortunately, they needed each other to validate they were okay. To them, there was no one else in the world like them. They could only relate to one another since they all had the same dysfunctions and struggles. They walked lockstep with each other. They shared the same fears. They needed one another to better understand themselves. They also needed one another to cover their wrongs. No matter what they did to hurt one another, they did not stay away from one another too long. Sadly, I could not exclude myself from this sad reality. Though I was their sister, I was just like them. Being a female, though, I did not fit into their world of the bro code. It was hard, and sometimes I wanted simply to be a brother without having to actually be a boy. I admired their love and closeness and how they would be there for one another, covering for one another, no matter the cost. As time passed, I started to see what we were doing. I began to resent them covering for one another's wrongdoings. They gave one another the freedom to carry on in their individual debauchery. There was never a clean slate. I would voice my concern, but they did not value my opinion. I was not a brother. This would hurt my feelings. Though, just like them, I was not actually one of them. Being left out was hurtful. I would have alone time with each of them from time to time, and they would express their ill feelings for one another. They would reveal what one was doing to another. I would intervene and act as a peacemaker. I wanted them to keep the lines of communication open and talk instead of bicker. And whenever I would bring them together to talk about their concerns, they would tell on me every time. I would be left looking foolish while they carried on as though they did not have any ill will toward one another. Maybe they just wanted to use me to get it all out of their hearts and minds. Perhaps they just wanted me to act as a listening ear and not try to fix their relationship. Obviously, they had figured out a way to not hold grudges. I just loved them dearly, and each one of them was so precious to me. My only prayer was for them to continue loving one another and come together in the good times and the trying times. Just be real to each other, I would preach. Somehow, they found it hard to be completely honest about their feelings. I worried their relationships much more than I worried about their relationships much more than I worried about myself. It was so sad because I had children and they were beginning to face their own trials in life. It seemed as though I was more into what was going on with my brothers than my own household. I was treating my brothers as if they were my children. I had my own life and was not dealing with personal obstacles. Perhaps it was easier to focus on their shortcomings rather than face my own. Mama would be there doting on them only when they picked themselves up and began to shine. She would parade them around like a proud mother, bragging about their success. However, when they would fall and be at their worst, they would become my problem, and I would have to nurse them back to health. No one was there to nurture and care for me when I stumbled. I was in trouble myself, yet still making my brothers a top priority. To be quite honest, even if someone had offered to help me, my pride would have probably not allowed me to readily accept it. Yet I was crying my eyes out and complaining because I felt unsupported and alone in my fallacies. I was silently screaming, "Help me." If anyone did reach out to help, I ran. It is difficult to love someone who has no clue how to love themselves. I did not know self love existed for a long time. All I knew was how to selflessly love others, mainly my brothers. I was silently screaming and begging others to love me without uttering a single word. Everything I was feeling about my brothers, myself, and others was dysfunctional. However, no one cared enough to tell me to stop the madness. Therefore, I carried on living a life of hell while inflicting hurt upon myself and allowing others to do the same. It would always be hard for me to leave Los Angeles whenever I visited. I had lived most of my adult life there and hated the thought of returning to Grand Rapids. I would be in Michigan wishing I was back in Los Angeles with my brothers. I miss my brothers so much. I missed our camaraderie. I longed for them and our love for one another. Now I was with them and we were all getting high together, including Elle. I was only supposed to be there for the weekend and ended up spending 2 weeks in Los Angeles being unproductive. Sherelle's birthday party was over, yet I was still in party mode and not wanting to leave my brothers. Tony called daily for me to return home. Each day I promised him I would catch the flight. However, each day I would not board a single plane. Finally, after 2 weeks, I was worn out and tired from running around and getting high. The drama between my brothers, paired with the endless supply of drugs, became overwhelming, and I knew it was time to leave. As I prepared to leave Los Angeles, I was worried about Bobby. The hoarseness in his voice was getting worse, and he neglected going to the doctor. I tried to take him to the doctor before I left. He made promises each day he would go the next day. When the next day came, he would not follow through. At this time, Bobby was off into a way about getting a phone call that one of them had died. Now, Bobby had added an extra layer to my concern because he refused to care for his throat. His appearance was also very concerning because he did look sick. It just did not feel right leaving without him knowing what was wrong. And if Bobby had plans to go to the doctor, I would have been the one to ensure he actually followed through. He would never go on his own volition. Nevertheless, I had to return home to care for my own children. in the midst of a failed marriage. On my last night in Los Angeles, I asked Bobby to promise he would take care of himself and go to a doctor. He made a promise, but I knew if he had not gone by this time, he probably would never go. It was bittersweet. I was leaving Los Angeles worried about Bobby as well as my other brothers, especially L. He was new to the drug game and was quickly being swallowed up. I was in bad shape myself. Perhaps they were equally worried about me. It seemed crazy how we worried about the next sibling more than we worried about ourselves. We were willing to do for the other one what we were unwilling to do for ourselves. This was another Debarge family dysfunction. I have your back and you have my back. We never have to worry about our own backs, so to speak, because it was the other sibling's responsibility. This was how we functioned, and it eventually took its toll on us in the worst way. To be continued. Well, I finished the book, y'all. That was great. Thank you again, Bunny Debarge. We greatly appreciate you. Thank you. All right. Thank you all in the chat. All of you who kept coming back and listening to the readings live as well as on the replay. I hope I've done this book reading some justice with all my shit talking. And that's what I do when I read books to myself. I do a lot of shit talking to myself. I crack myself up. I giggle. I put the book across my chest and ponder on what I just read at times, like I did throughout these readings. And I learned a lot. And I liked the way she illustrated the um, the mechanics of their dysfunction, much like how Tommy did in his book through Bobby. In Tommy's book, he had the roadmap to healing for the Debarge family, and so far they're all not on board, and they're all not on the roadmap that was illustrated in Tommy's book. I wonder how many of them read Tommy's book. Maybe they all did. But drugs, substance abuse is a powerful thing. It's a stronghold. And so before I hit end this stream, in a brief prayer, I ask the Lord to deliver each and every Debarge in the name of Jesus. Tear down every stronghold that is binding them in the name of Jesus. Loose them unto freedom and salvation. Only you can do it, Lord. If you don't do it, it won't get done. In the name of Jesus, we thank you. We praise you. We give you all the glory. Amen.